What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast.
Where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. All right. Welcome, guys. Andy, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. We're doing the San Francisco 49ers today. I got my
Yes, sir.
1994, great year for the San Francisco 49ers. Won the Super Bowl that year.
Sure.
The Steve Young season. Man, I had a chance to go to a 49ers game a couple seasons ago. So the 22 season, not this past one, but the one before. And me and my brother got there, and we walked up the stairs, and Jerry Rice was just standing up there, like on a little platform, like just like greeting fans, like waving. And we were both just like, oh, this is, coming from like Lions fandom, it's just like, oh, this is one of those like real franchises that they write, like they make movies about. Like, it's like, this is, it's up there with like all of the blue bloods that we talk about now. And I think all things considered, like in the modern era, there's an argument to be made that they are the blue blood. I mean, there's like the Patriots, there's the Steelers, and then there's them, right? It's kind of like those three teams, and the Chiefs are now like flirting with it, but prior to Mahomes, it wasn't the Chiefs.
Yep.
What do you say about this team, man? It's unreal how good they are. It's just unreal. And the fan base it's just one of the most active, impassioned fan base.
Yeah.
Fan base.
Oh, remember that opening Lions game we went to a couple years ago, and it like you looked down the line and it was just a sea of red with like a few blue jerseys. I mean, we were in Detroit, bro. It was Jared Goff and Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes' first game together, all of them. It was kind of the first game of the new era. Patricia was out, Quinn was out, Stafford was out. Like, we were hyped to go to that game. We were like, oh, it's a new era, baby. And we went in there and it was just a sea of red.
So I don't know, man. I just wanted to touch on how just amazing this franchise has been, and just kind of this fan base and the talent on this team. But let's roll the clip, man. Let's get active. All right, so we're back. Hope you guys liked that little intro there. Generally when we come back from our little intro and from our greeting, I guess, we talk about last season and we do a recap, and then we move into this year. And with some of these teams, I like to do something a little different, and to me, this team is no exception. I thought about last year and how great this football team was. And I mean truly great. Like, this is one of the better football teams over the course of a season and a postseason that I've seen in a long time. From Deebo to Kittle to what Christian McCaffrey did to even the defense kind of regressing and still being like slightly above league average and making plays all season and winning them games as well. You've got the most influential, I would argue, offensive coordinator at head coach in the entire NFL right now. You've got the legacy. You've got a GM that I think does some things that puzzle me, but I think is a really, really good GM. I mean, the proof is there with the rosters he's built. But you came up short last year in the Super Bowl. And I was pulling for you guys to win. After you beat my Lions, I just thought, you know what? This was the 49ers' year. Just go finish. And I was very disappointed in that outcome. It's an overtime loss. It sucks. But this is, last year, I felt like you were the second best team in both seasons. I always break every NFL season down by the regular season and the postseason. To me, it's two different years, right? Because not everybody makes the postseason, and the team that wins the Super Bowl is the postseason best team, but it's not always the best regular season best team, right? Um, I felt like last year this team was the second best regular season team behind Baltimore. And, that's not a shot, but they proved it when they came in there on Christmas and took your lunch money. Um, and they were the second best team in the playoffs behind Kansas City. You won a tough, narrow game against Green Bay in the divisional. Then you host Detroit, and you know, as Kittle said in the Netflix series, they had us in the first half. Not gonna lie, I mean, Detroit came out and completely stepped on your necks. You composed yourself. You came back out at half, and the better team won, in my opinion. That's no shot at my Lions. You were better than us last year. But then you lose the Super Bowl in overtime to the Chiefs, right? And it brings us to where we are now. And you know, I thought about something because doing these shows, it's so tedious. We do so many episodes, and I thought, what was the thing when I was a kid that like initially made me love this game, right? Back when I was born in the mid '90s, right? I got the 1994 Steve Young shirt on, right? And I thought about it, and I traced the steps back to the beginning, and I used to have these, my dad or my uncle, somebody bought me all of these 90s, like every season in the 90s Super Bowl champion VHS tapes. And they had, a recap of the season of like, the Cowboys Super Bowl champion, the Niners Super Bowl champion, the Packers, every 90s team. And it's like an hour long, and does the whole season. It was an NFL Films thing. And they were so, so good that as a little boy, it made me fall in love with football. And I would watch these over and over and over again. And with the Dallas Cowboys videos, they would always play the Bills in the Super Bowl, and they would always beat the Bills in the Super Bowl. And I remember thinking, when I was a kid, like, man, there was this team that's in all of these videos, but they never win. They don't have their own video. They're just always like the super villain in the Super Bowl that the Cowboys come in and get, right? Or the Giants come in and get. And there's no Buffalo Bills cassette tape because they didn't win one. And what I love about football and what I love about life is that I feel like history repeats itself. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that we see has happened before in some version. Every story has been told in some version. And when I look at this 49ers team in kind of the Shanahan, Kittle, John Lynch era, I see the 1990s Buffalo Bills, the early 1990s Buffalo Bills. And when I thought about this, I decided to look at this. And the parallels are crazy, right? Like, you've got Kyle Shanahan, who's the most influential offensive mind in football, I would argue, outside of maybe Andy Reid. But I would say Kyle's influence is probably more current even now when you look at the coaching tree. And back then, the Bills had Mark Levy, who revolutionized the no-huddle offense and had the K-gun offense was the nickname there. You had an elite processor at quarterback in Jim Kelly. You had a star wide receiver in Andre Reed. And you had Thurman Thomas at running back, who was consistently a top 1, 2, or 3 running back in the league every year. And on top of it, you had Bruce Smith, who was an all Hall of Fame defensive end and one of the greatest, defensive players of the 90s, right? And, when I think about the parallels of that team versus the 49ers, that coach, that team back then, they had 8 players and coaches on that squad, that 4-time AFC champion squad that made the Hall of Fame. That was a dominant football team that never was. And I can't help but to wonder if maybe when I look at this coach and this roster and this fan base and some of the iconography around this 49ers team that we've witnessed, if maybe we're looking at the new version of the 1990s Buffalo Bills dynasty that never was. It's a thought. I'll leave it up to the fans to tell me if you think I'm tripping on this parallel, but I don't know. It felt like last year was your year. Every year in Buffalo, they thought it was their year, and every year they made it, and every year they didn't finish. And maybe your time is coming. But if it doesn't, this will go down with Buffalo as one of the greatest squads we've ever seen not win a ring. So, yeah, that was my thought on last season and really on the past 4 seasons and kind of the historical parallel there for that.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's there, right? It's hard to deny it. These seasons are long, man. Like they're not. It's not easy to go to the NFC Championship every year. It's not easy to go to the Super Bowl. 2 out of 5 years. It's wear and tear. It's more games that are already brutal, right? You added a 17th game on this year. That's 20 games that they played. Like that's crazy. You know what I mean? That's
every year they get so close. Every year they get so close, just like Buffalo. And every year they have this great squad. They got Jim Kelly, they got Thurman Thomas, they got Andre Reed, they got Bruce Smith. And then every year you get there, and it's just never your year. And we don't talk about the 90s Bills anymore. Like, we never even discussed
what's there to
that
talk
team.
about? They never won it.
But they made four, and they were such a good football
100%.
team. Like, no, there's
all they had to do is win one.
Right. And, and they're seen as like
history
almost
does not.
Yeah, it doesn't remember the second place team.
Period, man. They just don't.
So, I appreciate you guys taking that walk with me with that conversation. And, I think over the course of this episode, we'll kind of unpack whether or not we think this might be the year. You're certainly on a short list of contenders, obviously, as you've been for the past 5 seasons. But let's pivot, and let's start with maybe the most... probably ironically, maybe the least talented player on this team from a hype standpoint, but the most talked about player on this team because of the position he plays. Where are you on Brock Purdy in 2024? The enigma that is, Mr. Irrelevant.
Oh boy, it's so hard. He's the most frustrating player I think I've ever had to evaluate, because it's like, the question I keep coming back to is, do you elevate this team, or does this team elevate you, right? And I think there's a fair argument both ways, right? Like there's no... I think that the term game manager is a little frustrating when dealing with a team this good, right? It's like, when you look at his numbers, and we'll go through them, right? Like I don't... before I nitpick anything, I need to, and I want to give Brock Purdy his flowers, because being Mr. Irrelevant, you weren't like a 4th round flyer. You weren't like even like a 6th round guy like Brady. Like you were the very last pick in the draft, where they roll out a really like dickhead jersey and say, "Oh, it's Mr. Irrelevant. Oh, you're the last pick in the you're made a mockery of." And this kid this year, 4th in completion percentage. He was second among guys who played over 10 games. I think Jake Browning and like Mason Rudolph were actually 1 and 2. 5th overall in yards, 1st in average, 3rd in touchdowns, 1st in passer rating. I mean, that's crazy. You're the last pick in the draft, and those are the numbers that you're putting up. Like that to me is, on a base level, unbelievable. The problem that I have is I've been told all year, oh, he should be the MVP, and oh, when he's up for his extension next year, he's going to be the highest paid player in NFL history. And it's kind of like, I don't know if that's a good move personally. And as a fan of another NFC team that's in that Super Bowl window, in that contender window, I do feel like paying Brock Purdy that type of money completely benefits me and my team. Because I truly, and this is like including my own Jared Goff, right? This is like, I think the highest paid quarterback in the league should be left to the guys who really elevate their team. Patrick Mahomes should be 1. It shouldn't even be close, right? It should be a 1 and then a mega gap. 2 should be Josh Allen, 3 should be Joe Burrow, and 4 should be Lamar Jackson. That is just how I feel like it should be. That should be the order of players in which they are paid, and the best quarterbacks get paid the most money. Granted, that's not the market. That's not how the market works, and I'm not here to pocket watch anybody. If Brock Purdy becomes the highest paid player in NFL history, I mean, hey, props to him, man. I got nothing personal against Brock Purdy, and I want to see the kid win, but again, the problem I have is like, do you actually elevate your team, or does your team elevate you? I mean, let's go through it, right? Trent Williams, your left tackle, first team All-Pro. Christian McCaffrey, your running back, first team All-Pro. Arguably the best player in the NFL last year. And for what it's worth, for my money, he easily was. He should have been the MVP, not Lamar. It should have been Christian McCaffrey. Kyle Juszczyk, first team All-Pro. George Kittle, first team All-Pro. You have Brandon Aiyuk, second team All-Pro. Try playing from behind without Fred Warner, first team All-Pro. Chardavius Ward, second team All-Pro. Nick Bosa, one of the 5 best edge rushers in this game. And that's before I even mention guys like Deebo Samuel, Javon Hargrave, Dre Greenlaw. I mean, you guys they're loaded. They're loaded all around this roster. It is one of the craziest rosters I've ever seen. And then, not to mention your head coach, as Ian said earlier, outside of Andy Reid, is probably the best offensive mind we've ever seen. So again, are you elevating this team, or is this team elevating you? And the answer was within a guy that I think we all remember in 2019, Jimmy G. I went back to 2019, the last time you guys played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and lost a close game and had a quarterback who we were being told was, he's more than a game manager. He's really that guy. He's really that guy. And he was. I mean, he was 6th in completion percentage. He was 12th in yards. He was 3rd in average. He was 5th in touchdowns, and his passer rating was 2nd in the league. And that year, he had Kittle was an All-Pro. DeForest Buckner was a second-team All-Pro. Richard Sherman was a second-team All-Pro, and Nick Bosa was the Rookie of the Year. So he didn't even have all the All-Pros that you have currently. He had half of that. So I just have to ask, are you really that guy? You're good. I'm not here to deny that you're good. You're really good. Are you best player in the NFL? Are you really an MVP candidate? Are you really deserving of being the highest paid player in NFL history? Because for what my money's worth, you're not. That's just how I feel about you. I think you're a good quarterback, but I do think that you leave I have to see you without all these All-Pros. Go play in Carolina for a year. That's how I can really evaluate you. What really are you? Because I know what I watched in the second half of that Lions game, in the NFC Championship game. I watched a guy who, frankly, delivered when it was time. But then I go to the Super Bowl 2 weeks later, and I watch Christian McCaffrey get completely neutralized by that Chiefs defense, and Spagnuolo design an entire defense around stopping your run game, and I watched you struggle. I watched you guys have 10 points less than you typically did throughout the entire year because your actual best player, Christian McCaffrey, the real MVP of the team, the real MVP of the league, was neutralized. He was taken out of the game, and you couldn't rise above.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the really stark, graphic that I think people who are Brock Purdy truthers get kind of tired of seeing, and I understand why. And I don't mean to be that guy who piles on to remember the graphic. I know it's annoying, but there is that graphic, that very damning graphic of looking at what his numbers are when Deebo Samuel's not on the lineup. And you saw it in the game against Cleveland last season that they lost, and they ended up, on a Jake Moody missed field goal at Cleveland. When you take one of these guys out of the puzzle, he tends to regress, quite a bit. But again, I mean, you're spot on the other end of the spectrum. He has been very clutch, and this whole conversation, I mean, the doubters going into this season who were like, yeah, I think he's just not that great. He's not that great. He threw some great balls. I mean, look at the Dallas game. I mean, against that Dallas defense,
a great quarterback.
He won them that game.
No, 100%. 100%. I totally agree.
Such a good player.
I think when I think of game manager.
Yeah. Is that the way they win? No, is that the way they win? I mean, is he truly elite enough as a talent and as a quarterback? Because I think he's an elite processor. I do. And I think he's truly, the fact that all these teams missed on him, I think is a bummer. But I'm with you that you got to wonder, if you pay this guy and you start losing these pieces, is he that type of quarterback? Is he that type of quarterback?
No, I don't think he is.
Right.
I think
That's a different question.
Because when I think of game manager, I think of Ryan Tannehill or Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder. You know what I mean? Those are game managers. Those are guys that you look at and you go, okay, you're not really like that. Brock Purdy's definitely better than that. I just don't think he's much better than that, I guess. You know what I mean? I think I think he's much more Baker Mayfield than he is Joe Burrow, right? And all year I've been told, oh, he's right up there with Burrow. I mean, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. It's like, all right, go
Tua.
put Joe Burrow on that San Francisco. He's Tua. Yeah, 100%. He's Tua.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit better than Tua.
100%.
But
He
it's
is. But again, you put. You know, I saw this hilarious tweet a few weeks ago, and somebody said, would Kyle Shanahan trade Brock Purdy for Trevor Lawrence? And somebody retweeted it and responded and said, Kyle Shanahan would drive Brock Purdy himself to Jacksonville in a busted down car with no AC to get Trevor Lawrence. And that's just like the real spill. He just would. That's just how it goes. He just would do that. And you know, you're talking to me like he's Joe Burrow or he's Josh Allen. I mean, go put one of those guys on this team, they will go 17-0. I mean, point blank period. They would go 20-0. They would win the Super Bowl easily. You know what I mean? Like, this is the most stacked roster I think I've ever seen in my life. When you really go through it, and especially like this past year, when I'm looking at, 9 all pros, it's like, what are we talking about? That's insane. And then I read these lists from the 33rd team and ESPN, and we're ranking who's got the best, and it's just Niners. It's like, who's got the best this? Who's got the best this? Who's got the best this? And it's not. It feels a little like, all right, that's ridiculous. Like, really? And then you go through it and you're like, yeah, they do have the best tight end. They do have the best wide receiver core. They do have the best left tackle. They do have the best running back. You know, it's like that's just facts. So I don't know. You know what I mean? I walk away from it not really knowing the answer. I know what my gut tells me, and my gut tells me is that you're not really that guy. But you were also in the Super Bowl. So, like, I can't say you're not that guy because, I mean, Tua's never won a playoff game, right? And we're saying that's his comparison. I mean, not many guys have gone to the Super Bowl. You had to lock in that second half and beat a very good Detroit team. You had to lock in the second half and sneak away with that kind of steamrolling Packers team. But, again, were those teams like world beaters? I think the Lions were a lot of fool's gold last year. I think the Packers were just really hot. Did they really should they really have been there? You know, should the Lions even have really been there? You know, they narrowly escaped the Rams. They narrowly escaped the Bucks. And then they come to you guys and like you said, you know, they had you guys beat badly in the first half. And then, you know, your defense locks in and starts making their offense do Detroit things, if you will. And you guys had a couple of, the Aiyuk catch off of the cornerback's face. Like there was some fool's goal. There was some luck in there. But in the end of the day, you still overcame. But, you know, what NFC powerhouse was really there outside of you guys last year? You didn't have to go through an elite Philly team. You didn't have to go through the Rams who were also red hot, and you guys have a ton of history amongst yourselves. Like you kind of avoided those teams. You didn't have to see a Cowboys team that you were really supposed to see at some point, but they choked. So I don't know, man. It is hard to evaluate Brock Purdy for me, and that's just kind of where I'll leave it. You guys can probably disagree, and you guys will get triggered, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think no. I mean, I honestly believe that there's a lot of 49ers fans who might vibe with what you're saying a little more than you think. I mean, I think objectively, it is a real question. Nobody's discounting what he's done at this point. I think he has proven it. But it's also like from a business perspective, what's going to happen if? It's just that question, and I think it's an interesting conversation. And again, with the playoff stuff, I mean, they were so good in the regular season. They secured themselves a 1 seed, right? And that's what enabled them to kind of the Super Bowl went through Santa Clara last
San
year.
Francisco.
And,
yeah,
and that's the thing. So you have that. You have to. Are you going to be able to do that again in a regular season? Are you going to be so dominant this regular season again, all season, that you have that serendipitous playoff run?
It's hard to say.
I think that is a super interesting conversation, and it kind of segues me into some of the meat and potatoes that I wanted to discuss, particularly with what I also am with you on in belief that this is maybe the best offensive unit in football, all things considered. We've talked about Shanahan Reed has the pedigree, but I think right now, for my money, Kyle Shanahan is the most influential offensive mind in terms of what we're seeing in the league. We're seeing New Orleans just hired their new OC. He's a Shanahan guy, right? Got Mike McDaniel going over to Miami, kind of keeping that system. D'Amico getting the head coaching job. Salah, on the defensive side. This 49ers factory of coaches is a big deal. But in terms of personnel, I'll start with the Yak gods, if you will. No better place to start than Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you said it best. I think he was last year's MVP. Is he the best running back in football at this point? I think if you look at the tape, the last 2 years in San Francisco, he has elevated into the best running back in football. He can play between the tackles now. He's built more strength. I don't know if you can see it, but I can. He's put on size. He's playing bigger. He's playing stronger. He's playing more physically. He was a little more of an outside, receiving back in Carolina. And the last couple years, he has elevated his game. Not that he always wasn't a good running back. He's always been a good running back. He might be the best pure running back. But once you factor in what he does as a pass catcher, it's game over. I mean, this guy with the ball in his hands he's going to be one of those guys, and we have touched on this in other episodes, so it's not me just glazing the Niners for the sake of this episode. He's going to be one of those guys that in 15 years, when you and I are in our mid-40s, we're going to be like, remember Christian McCaffrey? Like, God, he was nice. Like, we still talk about LaDainian Tomlinson from time to time, Adrian Peterson from time to time. He's in that class of, like, all-time guys of his generation. And in terms of being a receiver and this kind of yak threat that Kyle has built here, I honestly think that at 30 years old, instead of retiring, he could just go be Cooper Kupp for a team and play pure wide receiver in the slot and just move all over the field. Like, that's how good he is at the underneath, out of the backfield, catching the ball, slot stuff. Like, he could potentially be like, if he just was a wide receiver for a couple of years, like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, he's that good at just receiving. So you got Christian McCaffrey, right? And, you needed to make that trade because, frankly, you've made some head-scratching picks that just haven't panned out with those third-round running backs, right? The Trey Sermons, the Tyrion Price, like these guys, they really needed to secure that guy. And he's been an infinity stone for sure for this team. Deebo Samuel. Look, he led the league again last year in yards after catch. He catches most of his stuff on or behind the line of scrimmage and still has 1,000 yards receiving, it feels like, every year. He plays like a running back with the ball in his hands. He's huge. He's incredibly strong. And he might be the most difficult player to tackle in the NFL. His combination of speed, shiftiness, strength, and power. He's like a combination of a fullback and a wide receiver in one body. We know what Deebo is. George Kittle back on the squad. I mean, he had surgery this offseason. It's something I'm a little worried about with kind of the nature of Kittle and the way he plays. Full stop, like all gas, no brakes with George Kittle and him getting banged up. Getting banged up is a theme over the years with these Kyle teams, and it's something I worry about a little bit this year, given how kind of well everything went last year with that in that department. But when he's healthy, he's on the field, he's arguably the best all-around tight end in football. I know he's not quite the receiver that Travis Kelce has been, but he is easily a top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 any Sunday at receiver. He's probably the best yards after catch tight end. And when you factor in his ability as a blocker, he's really two tight ends in one, right? These teams run two tight end sets. He's one tight end, but he's two guys. He's that good. I wanted to touch on this new draft pick, a guy that I was really, Andy, you can vouch for this. I was really high on this guy coming into the draft, and the 49ers, they did what a lot of people considered to be a reach. I'm not so sure. I got a ton of pushback from my Xavier Worthy take in Kansas City. I think Xavier Worthy's great. I think the difference is when I look at Xavier Worthy, I think the expectation should be more like the expectations we're putting on Ricky Parasol. Does that make sense? Talented guy who needs a little bit more development, maybe needs a little bit of time, but 4.3 speed, 65 catches last year with horrible quarterback play. He played with 3 different quarterbacks in college, right? Jaden Daniels at ASU, Anthony Richardson at Florida, and then I forgot the guy's name in Florida last year, but he was awful. His adjustments in route running are elite. He's not a huge guy, but he's not tiny. He's got the NFL speed, the NFL size, and he just plays smart. You know what I mean? Like, he's got that heady stuff. He's got almost like that Devontae Adams quality of like the little crafty veteran moves that he's built over time while he's only been playing in college. The guy that I really wanted to discuss last is the guy that everybody's kind of tired of talking about. Brandon Aiyuk. Look, Brandon Aiyuk is this team's best wide receiver. Deebo's not a pure wide receiver. Kittle's not a wide receiver. I'm not going to waste my time talking about Juwan Jennings and Ronnie Bell. They're nice pieces, but they're not that. Ricky Parasol's a rookie. I don't know what he's going to become. I like him. I'm high on him. Aiyuk has really been that guy at receiver in terms of route running, downfield stuff. He could be a number 1 on a lot of teams in the NFL. The contract conversation is getting old. I'm tired of seeing it every day. It seems to me something that is being discussed a little too much. I want to hear more about the rest of the 49ers rather than just, Brandon Aiyuk stuff. But I wanted to use this as an opportunity to call out the front office a little bit. I think this 49ers way, this 49ers style, if you will, of waiting to pay players until they're like disgruntled and we're into camp is a really odd approach. And you saw it with Deebo a couple years ago, and then he came out and put his worst year that he had so far as a pro on film, before or since. And there was that big quote of like, oh, me and Kyle like put it behind us. I had a bad season. He played badly. He played poorly that year. Nick Bosa took a step back last year. Why? Because he was holding out all of this time. Deebo holding out. Now Aiyuk is apparently holding in, but that's only a matter of time if this deal doesn't get done. To me, there were 2 choices here for San Francisco, and they chose neither one. The first choice was the obvious choice, which was after the season ended, when free agency began, paying Aiyuk what you were willing to pay him immediately before the wide receiver market exploded. I think you and I texted each other the second Calvin Ridley made that money. You knew it was about to be a crazy offseason at the receiver position with that market. If I'm John Lynch and I see Calvin Ridley get that money, I am burning down the phone lines to contact his agent and be like, we have a deal. $28 million a year, this much guaranteed. Because after Ridley, everything snowballed. I mean, we saw Waddle get all this money. We saw Amon-Ra get all this money. These guys got all this money. And the 49ers still haven't paid Aiyuk because he wants more than they want to pay. But that is the market. That's the way it goes. I also think there was another option here if you didn't want to pay him, which was trading him ahead of the draft. And when I look at what they did by drafting Parasol, that means Parasol has been on their board for a while. They took a receiver in the first round. I'm not against taking this guy in the first round. It's a player I believe in. I think he's going to be a really good player. But when I look at your offense, I'll leave it on offense because your defense is a different conversation we'll get to. There are some genuine holes on this offensive line. You have Trent Williams, who is an all-timer at left tackle and will probably most definitely be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And then you got a whole lot of not you-know-what around
Also
him.
holding out. Also holding out. Today.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, also holding out. Again, the 49er way. And you gave Christian McCaffrey more money when he wasn't really even due. You just decided to do that before making sure all your ducks were in a row with these other guys, right? So if you wanted to move off Aiyuk, you believed in Ricky Parasol enough to draft him in the first round, and you want to take that route. I think it's a dice roll, but I understand it. Ayuk's getting expensive. This team's getting expensive. the window is closing for like this particular roster. I get it, but you didn't do that. And what you could have done is you could have traded him to a New England, to a Los Angeles, to a team that really needed a wide receiver like him. And you probably could have gotten a late first, early second out of it. You probably could have gotten an additional third. And you could have added a piece like Jackson Powers-Johnson onto this interior offensive line to give a 35-year-old now he's 35, now he's holding out, left tackle some support. And you chose neither path. I think this is a great organization. I think it's a very, good front office. I think it's a blue blood. We've touched on it. The success doesn't come out of nowhere. But I think this style of waiting while the market explodes, while players get disgruntled, while they're texting their buddies, while they're on social media going, yeah, they're not, why didn't I get my money yet? That kind of stuff. I think it's a mistake. And I think now they're going into, training camp just started when we recorded this a couple days ago. And there's still no Aiyuk deal. I don't understand why you're waiting this long. If you weren't going to pay him what you thought he wanted and you couldn't, if you can't pay him, then you should have traded him. If you don't want to pay him, then you should have traded him. If you're going to pay him, then you should have paid him when it was going to cost you $5 million a year less, and you were going to avoid this entire offseason of him and Jaden Daniels, pushing bunk beds together to make room for extra activities and doing that whole thing, that buddy thing that they're doing with that whole come get me thing. That's incredibly corny, but the reality is this isn't Aiyuk's fault. He wants his money. His time is now. You should have paid him 3 months ago or traded him. And that's my story on the offense. So, you know who these guys are. They're going to be contenders. That's it, bro. Yep. These guys are going to be contenders. This is a misstep to me. And I don't, because it's a good GM, I don't want to sit here and gloss over this. I think they've really, really pooped the bed on this whole operation here with Aiyuk. Makes no sense.
Yeah. And, and then now, because you've waited this long, now you have a disgruntled left tackle who has 3 years left on his deal, but sees, Penei Sewell get all this money. He saw Christian Darrisaw get all this money this morning and immediately said, yeah, no, I want a new deal. I'm sorry. I'm just as good as those two, if not better. I need to be the highest paid tackle in the league, point blank period. And now, if you would have, like you said, if you would have paid Aiyuk right after the Ridley deal happened, you'd probably have the cap flexibility to do this. But now you have to worry about both of these disgruntled players. And you need Trent Williams to play. You don't necessarily need Brandon Aiyuk to go out there and play, but you 100% need Trent Williams. So now you're going to have to prioritize Williams to get a new deal done, and that's going to rub Aiyuk the wrong way because he's going to jump him in line, most likely. I mean, I guess I don't know that, but... And
Christian already jumped him in line, and he wasn't even due for more money. And so this guy's looking around going... Did they really give Calvin Ridley that? I feel like I'm better than Calvin Ridley. What are we doing here? And it's I don't understand it. Let's pivot over to the defense. I think, this is another. I think the riches continue, if you will. The rich get richer.
100% they do.
Talk to me about the first half of this unit. The front seven. Where are you on these guys?
Yeah. We've done a lot of these now, and this is the first one that I feel like I can go through to you guys, and I could say, you got Javon Hargrave, you got Dre Greenlaw, you got Fred Turner, you got Fred Warner, you got Nick Bosa. I don't want to really go through and tell you guys what players you have anymore. You have an elite defense. You have an elite front seven. You have one of the 5 best edge rushers in the game. You have the single best duo in football at the linebacker position. And I know that I said that about the Jets a few episodes ago, but when you look at this, when you add the Devondre Campbell addition in from the Packers this year, it's the best. It's the best linebacking core. Your interior, you got Javon Hargrave, you have Malik Collins, you have Leonard Floyd coming off the other edge. What do you want me to say? You're elite. You're elite. You're elite. You're elite. And every year it feels like Patrick Mahomes just gets the best of you. Every time it just feels like somebody gets the best of you, whether it be. I mean, we watched it, right? We watched Patrick Mahomes go completely rogue in that game, and just slice and dice you, and there wasn't really anything that you could do about it. You added a ton of depth. You brought in Jordan Elliott from the Browns, Leonard Floyd from the Bills, Yater Gross-Matos from the Panthers, Chase Lucas in the secondary from the Lions, Ezekiel Turner for the Cardinals, Rock Yun-Sin from the Ravens, Isaac Yindom from the Saints. Like, you have a ton of depth now. But are you going back to our first part of the segment, going back to kind of what the overall theme of this entire episode has been? Can you get it done when it matters most? Because I watched you guys absolutely lock in and totally neutralize that Detroit offense in the second half. You had them rattled. You know what I mean? I think so much of those crucial Josh Reynolds dropped balls in the second half were because he felt those Fred Warner footsteps coming. You're a hard-hitting, physical team. And I just, it's kind of like Ian said, right? Like, after you guys beat my team last year, I was obviously crushed. But then watching the Super Bowl 2 weeks later, like, I wanted to see you guys win, because it's been this long journey that we've kind of all gone on with you. Nobody wants to see the Chiefs win again. That's a boring storyline. That's just adding to another dynasty. That's not fun. We all, as football people, dealt with that with the Patriots for the last 20 years. Like, I don't really want another dynasty like to rev up immediately. And you guys beat my team, so I could always just say, oh yeah, well, we lost to the eventual Super Bowl champions, and that's just not what happened. You guys, you got beat by Andy Reid. You got beat by Patrick Mahomes, and when you're clicking, I'm not sure there is anybody in the league that can really beat you. But again, you leave a lot to be desired in the moments that matter the most. Like, where was that second half team that went out there on their home turf and was down 17 points to Detroit? Where was that defense in the Super Bowl? Where was that drive? Where was that dog? Where was that? How many years does Fred Warner have of being elite, moving forward? How many years does Dre Greenlaw have? How many years does Nick Bosa even have, man? I mean, look at his brother, right? It's like one injury and you could really just be injury prone the rest of your career. So I don't know, man. I mean, you bring in Nick Sorensen. He's your new defensive coordinator. He was your DB coach. So you brought him in, you brought him in from within. You got rid of Steve Wilkes struggled last year, but the problem is like, you had Robert Salah, you had D'Amico Ryans, you didn't capitalize on those guys, and now they're off. I mean, D'Amico Ryans is like the hottest new coach in the NFL, and Robert Salah is the head coach for what is probably the best defense in the NFL when it's all said and done. So, you know what I mean? Like, this kind of revolving door of your guys' defensive coordinators, like, that's a lot of new playbooks to learn. That's a lot of new schemes to learn. And maybe hiring from within is the move. So you're not, maybe things will stay familiar, but if they stay too familiar to what last year was, I don't know, man. I don't know. Cause you got Steve Wilkes got fired about 15 minutes after the Super Bowl ended, and that's because he got, like I said, when it came down to it, Patrick Mahomes went completely rogue and was running options and was running. I mean, he's running a 3rd and 7 with the game on the line and he gets 12 yards. Like, what are we doing?
I thought the gap and zone discipline issue during that game in particular was like a major. Like,
it was crazy.
You see these things, right? Like, you and I watched the game so long. I mean, I was yelling at the TV, going, "What? Where are we?" It was this over pursuit, and I'll let you cook for a second. I'll let you cook and finish this out, but I'll touch on that a little bit with the secondary. But it was a huge issue last year, up front too. Just like this over aggressive, like, lack of control, lack of discipline, and like over pursuit, if you will, on a lot of plays where it's just like, stay home, guys. Come on, let's Patrick Mahomes.
No, 100%, and even last, like, even in that game, right? You had a guy who a lot of people were super high on in Chase Young, right? Like, you brought him in, you traded a 3rd round pick during the second half of the season for the second half of the season to bring him in, and he had moments. He wasn't some world beater. He's not the Chase Young that we all thought we were going to get for a career when he was drafted number 2 overall, but there was definitely moments where he was impactful, and it's like you look at it on paper and you're like, man, this is a really, really, really nice squad. Really good, solid front seven. And it just, again, with this team and this, for whatever reason, they just can't get over the hump. They need to have one dominant Super Bowl game. They need to have one dominant NFC championship game, not a half, whole game. You got absolutely cooked in that first half of the NFC championship game. You just did, and Jordan Love had his way with you guys all day in the playoff game.
Yeah, he did.
So,
and remember that hit, and so did Aaron Jones. Remember that hit that
yeah,
Laporta
facts.
laid on in that Lions game?
Yeah.
Laporta. Oh, was it Fred Warner he hit? I forgot who he hit. He blocked one of their guys, and it was just like you could see that Detroit was putting it on him. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think.
Well, I think just to kind of put a bow on this whole segment, it's what I'm trying to say is that you're not getting hungrier, you're getting more defeated, and it's showing. That first Super Bowl, you're hungry, you really want it, and to be fair, you guys were right there, and some things happen out of your control, right? Like you barely lose to the Rams. Your quarterbacks all die prior to the game, and then in the game against the Eagles. I think you were the better team that year too. And at a certain point, it's going to take a mental toll. It's a long season. It's a long off season. It's so hard. It's so incredibly hard to get to the playoffs as is. And then it's so much harder to get to the NFC Championship game, to have NFC Championship game be at your own house, to be the number 1 seed, and then to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, look at the Bengals, look at the Rams. Two teams who were there just a few years ago who haven't even thought about being back. It's really hard, and the fact that you guys have done this year in and year out is so impressive. I don't want that lost on you, but at a certain point, it's gonna fall apart, and you have I think the year was last year. I don't think you're gonna have a chance this year, but I don't know. Time will be the one that tells. So I don't know. Cook on the secondary.
I'm gonna gloss right over it.
To say about that,
because I think you covered the crux of the defense. Honestly, I'll say this much.
Yeah.
I think you have Charvarius Ward, who is, I think Charvarius Ward is arguably the best corner in football at physicality, press coverage. He's got the size. He was a second-team All-Pro last year. You know what you got there. I'm a Tufunga fan. I think he is a prime example of this overly aggressive kind of costing this team sometimes. But he's a playmaker. People like to compare him to Troy Polamalu, and he certainly is not that. But he's a lot of fun. I think my one question, I could talk about the secondary more, but I think for me, my one main question with this secondary is your cornerback 2 slot. We know how good this secondary can be at times, but it's, in terms of coverage, I think a very overrated secondary in the NFL. I don't think it's very good. A friend of the show, I hate to do this to the boy, but Ambry Thomas has kind of been barbecue chicken, like way more often than you would like. I'm not so sure that on a consistent basis that Ambry Thomas is a starting corner in the NFL. If I'm just being perfectly honest, he can play like it. But, you drafted Renardo Green out of Florida State in the second round this past draft. I'm wondering if he's going to have to be a starter at some point this year, because I don't know that you can keep, trotting Ambry Thomas out. I mean, just look at the divisional game against Green Bay. He, to me, reminds me of Cam Sutton last year with my Lions, where it's not that he's a bad player, but way too often you're just going, who's cover? Oh, my God, he's 3 yards away. What? Touchdown. It's just way too much for me. So I hope Ambry Thomas can figure it out, but I mean, it's been a few years, and the ups and downs have been glaring with Ambry. He's not bad. He's not a bust. He's not a bad player, but he's just very, very inconsistent. So I think we'll close it out with that. And I think we will just kind of briefly touch on our final projections for this team. I'll pass it over to you first.
Yeah, I hate to do this, but I do, again, to reiterate, I do think last year was your year. I think everything went right. I would never wish injury on anybody, but I do think, given their history and how Kyle Shanahan really kind of runs his team into the ground, I wouldn't be shocked if you saw, a Christian McCaffrey injury, or like you said, George Kittle coming off of surgery, and, Deebo's been banged up the last couple of years. He's dealt with a couple of injuries. So again, I don't, this is not me wishing injury on anybody. And I for your own sake, it just as fans of football, I hope none of that happens, but you do have to wonder when it's very rare when a team has kind of everything go right for an entire season. That doesn't happen year in and year out. And I do think that this is going to be a bit of a step back year for you guys. Whether that's through injury or just fatigue, right? Like just so much of these deep runs, man, they catch up with people. They just do. And you don't have a Patrick Mahomes on your team that can, make those runs in the playoffs with Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney, right? Like, you're kind of reliant on all these pieces gelling and being together and forming as one singular unit. So I do think I'm going to boldly suggest or boldly predict that you're going to be second in the division. I like the Rams a little more this year. I think they're going to have a little bit of a bounce back year where you're going to have a little bit more of a sit back year. I still think you're a playoff team, and I think you're absolutely a contender and a threat. 11 wins, maybe 10 wins, maybe, I don't see the dominant one seed that you were last year. I think it's going to be a significant step back for what your talent has, but not a significant step back in the fact of like losing the division or not making the playoffs. I mean, I think you'll still be there. But yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at with it, man. I have to just go with my gut here. I could be totally wrong. We could be back here in 10 months from now, and you guys could be clowning me in the comments, and I'll wear it. But that's just what my gut is saying right now. 10, 11 wins, second in the division, and still a very, very good football team who's a threat to anybody they have to see.
Yeah, I'm with you. You ready for my analysis to get real on professional?
Sure.
I don't like the vibes.
That's facts. I'm with you, bro.
That's it.
I'm with you fully.
You guys, I get comments from fans always on the video like you guys don't do enough research. How's that for research? How's that for film study? How's that for advanced metrics?
That's facts.
I don't like the way I feel about your team right now.
That's me going my gut. I just said
that's
that.
It.
It's like I'm with
man.
you.
That's it. And you know what? And that's what our channel is based on, man. It's based on our truth and our unequivocal truth, no matter what. I think the noise. I think the Aiyuk stuff. I think last year was kind of the perfect season, and I think relying on that again to me seems questionable. But you're going to be in the mix. So what does a failed season really look like? Losing in the divisional round? I mean, that's like really like is that that's sort of like
looking at your roster. No, we are, but I think looking at this roster head to toe, looking at this coaching staff, looking at everything considered, not winning the Super Bowl is a total and utter failure.
Yeah.
And
so
that's,
maybe
I'm sorry to
year,
put
but
that.
It's not for us.
I'm sorry to put that pressure on you. No, I don't even have you going to the Super Bowl. So I'm not sure I even have you in the NFC Championship. If I was to look back on it, I don't think I do. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, divisional round loss. That's where I expect them to be because it's just not it for me this year.
No, I'm with you. Guys, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. 49ers fans, thank you so much for sticking with us through this thing. And Andy, man, we'll see you on the next one, brother.
Sorry about it.
Hey, we can only be so high. They were my pick last season, and I almost got it. So there we go. All right. We'll see you later, man.
Peace.